I didn't go off. We had a delay. It's like, Ma, don't look. I'm changing. Boy, what are you doing in there? No, don't look.
We have this that is very like epic. I feel like we need to be like in the desert or something, with 1,000 candles around us or something.
A White Cliff face intro. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Bill gave us the fail horn for that. It wasn't
Wah,
that.
wah.
Womp. All right, you ready for it, Mike? Well, hello. Welcome back to your favorite pandemic podcast. That's right, pencil to pencil, and you're you're soaking in it.
For the
How many-
third year now. We're going to our third year of pandemic podcasts.
How long? How many years?
This is going into the third year of the pandemic podcast. No, it's third year of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think you're right because we started this in 2020. No, we were doing the audios in 2019, right? And then
That was before the pod, but we've been doing this since the pandemic. The live version.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think I believe we started doing the live video things. I think was it April, the kind of like the weeks after the pandemic shut everything down.
Right. So we're going to be going into our third year of the talking from our cave.
Well, then I think we're due some credit, if I must say so myself. I think it's very fantastic that we've been coming to you guys on a really steady clip for so much time. I'm really happy that we've gained an audience and also our penciliers in good standing who come back every week to watch us do our thing. It's edutainment at its finest, Mike.
Edutainment.
It's razzmatazz. It's prestidigitation. And you can only get here pencil to pencil. Let me do our intros. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Jamar Nicholas. You ready for it? Philadelphia's favorite son. Kevin Scrapple, because bacon was taken. And John Luke Picard, engaged. I am joined at the proverbial hip by my best bud and Master Chief of Comic Illustration, Michael Manley. Say what's up, Mike.
Evening, ladies and joins.
Good to see you. Just to clear the screen, take a look above my head at the John. You know the John. This John above my head says our good buddies at Graphicsly make Clip Studio Paint. Yes, that Clip Studio Paint.
Don't they have a new box by now?
They might have. I have to talk to our rep. We need a new graphic.
That old box is like, no, yeah, we're selling these really old copies. Almost nothing.
And Mike, I think I have Clip Studio Paint on several devices. What's really cool is that it runs on Windows, also Mac, and also on Android and iPad. So you have no excuse at this point.
You mean you draw on it on your Android phone?
Well, they have I have it on my tablet.
It's an Android tablet.
I have a Samsung tablet, but there are people that have like the Samsung Notes that have the little pen. You could probably draw it on your phone, and they also have a thing with the Samsungs where you can second screen it into your computer or onto your television, and you could draw there. It's pretty cool. D Brad, what up, D Brad? D Brad says I have Studio Clip Paint. You messing me up, man. It's Clip Studio Paint. What are you saying? I thought I was
Studio. I have Paint Clip Studio.
I thought I was dyslexic for a second. What?
I love those sweet lead paint chips. Those are good.
I have Studio Clip Paint. What? And also, you look at the John over to my mirror right. Our good buddy John Morrow at Two Morrows Publishing is the publisher of Mike Manley's fine periodical Draw! Magazine. Some of you may know me from Draw Magazine, regular columnist, and
It's a little drawing of you in there.
there is, and Krusty Critic trying to save you a dollar in your pocket by reviewing art supplies you don't need to buy.
You're trying to prevent sad
Sad.
art experiments, sad art endeavors. Oh, I bought that pen. It looked good, except it turned yellow after a week.
Yeah. And Mike, are there any things going over tomorrow's as far as sales? There's always something popping.
I don't know. I mean, John, I'm sure if you go, he usually has weekly or monthly sales on something.
Mm-hmm.
I've been over there in, I guess, the last month, but John always has something.
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't, he always has bundles. Like you can get the draw bundle, you can get all of them for like a really good price now. And we might actually be out of paper copies of some of the issues now.
Wow.
So there's some that you don't have. I mean, I know he's running a big towards the end last year. So you can go over. But they're always available digital PDFs.
So if any of you guys out there watching us are dragging your feet on Draw Magazine, or you're like, what's Draw Magazine? Fella, you're missing out. Go to tomorrows.com, cop a PDF, try one on for size. And as a lot of you know, the beginning of this podcast is really a sister project to Draw Magazine, where we wanted to kind of bring the magazine into a new digital age where, you know, everything's visual these days, Mike. Like people want to see you.
With the kids and the Glaben.
Right? People want to see us. People want to see artists. Razzmatazz. Artists do their art. And, you know, maybe we could start one of our conversations talking about how the modern cartoonist, Mike Manley, it's almost a hindrance if you aren't savvy as a personality of some sort. Like, I think you kind of need another feather in your cap to have some sort of presence online, be it not even just, well, you have a website. Like, people want to see you talk. They want to see you draw. They want to see you.
No, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I do think that is with a point, but there's other people who don't have any. They have no presence. They still work, get plenty of gigs, and there's people who are really bad at it, you know, and they still get plenty of gigs. And I think that, you know, there's just so much of it. I was talking to Blevins about this the other day. There's just so much on a daily basis for you as an artist, especially if you're a young artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been around a long time, so we have the ability to sort of hear through stuff and sort stuff pretty easily. That's like interesting, not interesting, you know, important, not important, because you have a lot of history. You've seen a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of experience. But to a young person, there's just this flood, just this torrent of bright, shiny objects every day. I see people posting things on Twitter, good and bad. Good and bad, I think, for them as people. Good and bad for them as artists. I think that it's pretty easy to get discouraged on one hand. It's pretty easy to believe in falsehoods on the other hand, because you see this stuff and you don't really know the context of it, right? So I've been doing this almost over 40 years, if I go back to when I originally started, like 1974, 75, right? And I started working when I was 15 in commercial art when I was in high school. So I've seen a lot of water under the bridge. But if you're 15 now, there's so much stuff that goes by so fast. And then how do you compare it? You know, you see stuff, you see trends, you see portfolio day, portfolio week, drawing while black, drawing while gay, drawing while trans, drawing while this, drawing while that. There's all these things, this challenge, that challenge, Inkcember, Inktober, Mermaid, all these things are going by, right? So I think it's really easy almost to be ADD or ADHD. And you're like trying to hit every fly with the fly swatter, you're trying to hit everything. And I think it's really too much for any person. And I think it makes people sometimes, from my observation from seeing younger artists and their comments, it seems to make them this combination of being excited, overexcited, desperate, and depressed all at the same time, right? I was somebody who had a post the other day that I commented on this. Well, what were you doing when you were 22? What were you doing? What were you doing when you were 22? Right? It was an interesting post because you had other people that said, like, well, I was going to be an artist, but I ended up being a veterinarian, and blah 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 blah. And so it was sort of interesting because I think a lot of times by the time you're in your what I call the terrible 20s, right? So you have high school years, you graduate in an art school, graduate, and then it's like onto your career. And that can be a frustrating transitional period for some people, because some people, and as we talked before, the majority of people who go to art school do not make it. That's just straight off reality. 2-3% of people make it. Most people don't. So a lot of people, when they go from art school now and they've got their debt and they transition in, there's that point at which you're just sending out work, trying to get sending out your portfolio. And it can be very frustrating because, it might be 3 to 5 years before you actually get work, get another job, then get another job. You know what I mean? You start sort of climbing the ladder. So I also think at the same time, when you're 22, you're just forming. And you can actually crash and burn several times between 20 and 40. It gets a little harder, I think, after you're 40 because you want to put mileage in. But, I think a lot of people feel so much pressure when they're in their early 20s. Like, oh, I've got to go to school and I got to graduate and I got to be like right on a top show or right on a top book or whatever. And sometimes it's just sort of unrealistic to expect that. Partially because you see other people, you see that 1%, 2-3% of people that are doing that, and you go, "Well, I did that. I would, where's my ham sandwich?"
Right. And before we go any further, I have to kind of give a primer for the show tonight. Because some of you cats and kittens may not know what's going on. Where's the guest? Where's the boot camp? What's going on? Well, tonight, Mike and I are going to do another freestyle session where we are just going to talk it up. We had some talking points, and Mike's about to go into his. But while we're discussing, feel free to add your 2 cents, put a comment in the chat if you're watching on Facebook. Put it in the replies. I think that's how it works. And if you're on YouTube, go to the chat box. I can't guarantee I'll put everybody's thing on the screen, but if it adds value to what we're doing, I'll do my best.
It's like, is that weight? Like, so much value. I can't.
So, and to your point, Mike, I think, social media, yes, YouTube, yes, influencers, yes, all of those things add to probably some of the agita of a viewer who wants to do this mystical thing that they're watching other people do at a really high level, right? Because there are people that have Instagrams or deviant art channels or YouTubes or Twitches who aren't amazing, but they're just putting their stuff out into the world. That's what we tell everybody to do every time we get a chance. Start a thing, do a webtoon, all those things, but it's all kind of mixing in with other people who are doing it at a super high level, other pros, maybe people who have been in the business who are like post pro. I can't think of like emeritus cartoonists and people on down from there. So maybe you could talk to that a little bit. How do you not drown, Mike, in the sea?
Well, kind of going back to what I was talking about before was that I think, you can see all of this going by, and what helps us is being older and having the perspective to be able to judge, what is important, what is relevant to you, what isn't relevant to you, or like, oh, that's interesting, that's cool, that's not what I want to do, right? And that a lot of it is sort of, it's like when you talking to a friend the other night, young friend, and when you look at an art of any of those art of books like we were showing last week, right, you see a book that's about that thick, and it shows you all the drawings and everything that were done for 3, 4, 5 years of production. But the reality is that it is a huge, giant wad of drawings that you don't see.
Right, the iceberg.
Right, you don't see. And so what happens is, I think, and it's partially because we're usually romantic types, artists, and you see this like, oh, the making of thing. And so it seems like almost like, what is like the making of my career, right? What is the making of my career? And I think it's hard for the young person to judge all that, because also not everyone has equal access, equal experience. We were talking right before the show, and I think, to me, one of the biggest differences is, we were talking last week when somebody asked, what would I do different now than what I would have done?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The world in no way resembles what it resembled when I was 15 years old, right? So when I first said I want to draw comics, okay, I had this dream, right? And then I had to do years of exploration on my own. You'd get a book, get a thing here, you'd read an article or whatever, and you do all this exploration, and you would read interviews with people, trying to glean some little kernel. You might read an interview in the Comics Journal or in some fan magazine, and the guy said, oh, I draw my layout small. That would be like a major, major thing, right? Now, if you're a young person and you say, I want to draw comics, there's all of YouTube and all of Twitch and all of this and all the stuff spinning, but it doesn't mean that it's all valid for you, or that you can even understand it or even process it, right? So again, I think part of it is that there's almost so much that it's confusing, and that's why I wanted to talk to on the show tonight about, how do you go from being the person who has the dream and actually achieving your dream, or you end up with what I call Pikachu fantasy camp, which is that you go to school, you're with all your friends, and it's a real cool, fun place, and you're having a fun time, and you're not really aware of the stacking of the debt and all this other stuff, right? And then you graduate, you're birthed, and then it's like, thanks, right? And nothing will necessarily happen automatically, right? Which is what happens to most people, right? You're like, oh, now I have to send my work out. I have to find a way to go from because schools will just take your art and your money, I should say, and you may not really be that good, but they kept you in school on life support, So every time about this time every year, I start getting letters from prospective an up-and-coming artist looking for a gig, or if I need an assistant, or I can recommend them. Also, parents who go, or adults who go, I have a friend whose sons, cousins, brothers, dogs, neighbor wants to do animation, right?
Mhm.
But they don't really know anything, but they know, okay, this guy is a cartoonist or this guy's done this stuff, so they don't really know anything about that process. And so it's still sort of perplexing and amazing that with all this stuff we're talking about spewing out, you know, thousands and thousands of things every day, people don't really have necessarily a very good idea of how to go from point A to point B and not end up being a victim of Pikachu fantasy camp. Like I mean, so many students would say, I'm going to have my own show on this, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. And they don't really have an understanding of like how this thing is layered, where I have friends, very good friends, whose children went to medical school. And when you go to medical school, there is a definite path to getting into medical school, right? The good medical schools take a small percentage of qualified people, right? And you have to do all these things to go to medical school. But art school is not like that. And so what happens is I think a lot of people get in and they go through and then they leave and they're still not really clear on their path. And they also don't really necessarily have the qualifying skill set. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, for a long time now, every year I get those people looking to get work. And then when you look at their work, you go, this person's not ready to get work, right? And you feel bad because that person's already spent God knows how much money going to art school. And when you look at their samples, you're going like, well, I wouldn't hire this person and I couldn't recommend this person, right? And most people don't want to hear that, right? Because they've invested all this money and time and they feel that they should be able to go forward. But, the reality is no one is owed a career, you or me or anybody else,
Mhm.
And I posted last week on Twitter because it was portfolio day. And I believe every day is portfolio day. Everything I draw every day is my portfolio, right? Everything I do every day is my work that I send in to the publisher or whatever. That's my portfolio, right? And if it were great, great. And if it's bad, well, maybe people wouldn't be, they'd be looking to replace me,
Mhm.
So I think that there's ever a day where like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and make my portfolio. It's a continual process.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think about to your early point about that kind of stasis that a lot of students get caught in after being in the bosom of art school, right? Because, like you said, everything is very structured if you let it happen to you, and you get used to having assignments and get used to the struggle of being so busy because you have so many projects due at the same time. And how come these professors don't why do they all think they're more important than the other guy? And then when it's all over, again, you're like you said, you're kind of sitting on a curb with your portfolio in an empty locker, and like, I guess I'm an artist now, but that's like when the work starts. And I think something that's really special about having an episode like this is that no one, if you're lucky, somebody tells you how this stuff works before you wind up on the street.
You
You know,
also have to be willing to listen, right? You also have to be willing to listen. And that's another, when we were talking earlier, I said, it's sort of like the way I separate it when I think about my career. You have the aspirational point, when you were a teenager. And then you have the prospective student. And then you have the student. Then you have the graduate and the young professional that's hoping to get work. Then you are the young professional and you're hoping to continue to get work. And then even after you're the professional, you're hoping to continue to have work, right? At no point is your career safe, right? No point is your career bulletproof. And I think that when you're younger, you think, oh, once I work for Activision, once I work for Disney, once I work for Lucasfilm, once I work for Marvel. But that's not really true. You really always have to be proactive about your career and adapting and growing and learning, improving yourself constantly, because there's just there is so much churn. And probably besides the being of the internet, the biggest difference for me is that all you have to do is look at Instagram. The volume of artists in the world today is, it seems like 1,000 times what it was when I was
Right.
coming along. And even if there were more artists, we wouldn't see each other. We wouldn't see each other's work. We wouldn't see each other's progress. You would see your pod, right? Your art pod of the people that you knew and what they're doing, right? But you wouldn't know, let's say in Philadelphia, there's a lot of cartoonists. This is like a city that's thick with cartoonists. It's one of those little places, right? But there's a lot of cartoonists here that are not in our pod. We have our pod, and some of our pod touches, like the 6 degrees of separation, right? But there's young and upcoming pods of cartoonists that we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And we probably never will know, or you may one day you will meet. But the difference is now there's so many more artists all putting their stuff up, all, competing. So I think you have to really have a different track and mindset when you're in school and then when you're out of school. And to go to school.
Yeah. So, let's throw some stuff on the screen. What up, Eternity Forever? Haven't seen you in a while. Happy New Year. Eternity says, oh, yeah, the gram is chock full of artists. I follow many artists from around the world on Instagram. So, I mean, that's one of the amazing things about the modern world we live in, that you can see art, just so much fantastic stuff from all over the place. But I'm not necessarily sure if it translates into those people jockeying for jobs. And one thing I want to try to get through in this episode, Mike, is that ley line between pro and amateur, right? And the idea that there's really dope art on the internet is fantastic. You can lose weeks of time just looking at tutorials on YouTube.
You can lose forever. I mean, you could just never exhaust it.
Right. Like, you could look at that stuff. You could look at hours and hours and hours of how to draw the perfect body shape on YouTube. But what are you doing with that? Right. So, I think, again, going to the thing about people consuming and us being a consumption-driven society, I think it's easy to get caught up in the belief that you're learning things through osmosis just because you're looking at them. Kind of like, I'm going to buy every art book and look at all of these, renderings of things, but never apply it to your own work, which I think is one of those crucial steps in becoming a pro. It's like, what are you doing with the information you're taking in? And then how are you applying it to your work? And then how are you applying it to getting work?
Right. And I saw I think was it Liang linked to one of those, like, I quit my job at Disney and now I'm, happy and blah, one of those things. And then one of the things the girl in that video was talking about was, not having her dream job, and then not happy and or not, not getting the kind of work that you wanted. And part of the things is that, your portfolio has to fit what people are looking for. Now, one of the main things that's different now, I would say even in the last 4 or 5 years, there's things called recruiters. There was no recruiter for Marvel Comics. There was no recruiter for DC. The recruiter was the editor that you might be fortunate enough, or maybe another artist that you would be fortunate enough to meet at a convention, who would then say, hey, here's my number, or, here's the address, send me the stuff to whatever, right? Now you have recruiters. And the recruiter knows what the qualification of the recruiter is, right? Does a recruiter really, when I started, the artists were in general were much more flexible because the old school guys had to do different things, right? If you came up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even in the early 70s, you had to do whatever. You might get a superhero job, or you might get a horror job, but if you wanted to continue to work, you had to be flexible. And the people who worked the most were the most flexible and were on time. Now you have a recruiter, right? And even in comics, it got to the point where if you wanted to draw for Marvel and you wanted to draw Spider-Man, you had to show them Spider-Man.
Right.
You couldn't show them Batman because they were like, oh, this is really cool, Batman. I don't know if you can draw Spider-Man, right? Now that is a sort of the narrowing of the editorial, right? And the skill set, the knowledge, the depth that the editors had. Because the editors I met in the beginning could look at something and go, your drawing is good, your storytelling is good, you draw good hands, I'm going to try you out on this. And if that worked, we'll try you out on that, right? Now you have recruiters, and you have to have a portfolio that fits what the recruiter is looking for. So it might be we're looking for you have a show, we're staffing up, it's a preteen show, and if you're drawing props, just show them props. Don't show them backgrounds, because they're like, okay, here's backgrounds, but I'm looking for props.
Right.
Right. So part of it now is that it's a little bit more complicated. And that's on you. That's not on them. That's on you as an artist. You have a prop portfolio. You have a prop portfolio for a little kid show, a prop portfolio for an action adventure show. You know what I mean? A prop portfolio for a Bob's Burger kind of style show. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to just say, this is what we're looking for. And if you send them the wrong kind of portfolio, they're probably, because they get hundreds of these things.
That goes in a circular file.
Right. That goes into the, right. Yeah. I mean, I think I remember Mimi had applied for something. And she was fortunate that the person at Disney wrote back and said, well, they didn't think she was a fit for the show. They wrote her back and actually gave her a bit of advice about what to do in the future, which is good. Because one of the things I read very often on Twitter that the young artists are frustrated with is now it's like you send your work out, that's it. You don't hear anything. You don't hear, got it, looked good, doesn't fit, or no. Sometimes you would rather just have no. That's bad. You know what I mean? At least you would have something to work with. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of school that you have to do. Not all schools are good at that, at being able to tell the prospective young artist what it is that they need to do. Some schools are better at it, and usually those schools are staffed by people who are currently working within the industry. But I can tell you from teaching, a lot of times I'll have a student come up and they'll say, I want to do animation. Okay. And then you talk to them a little bit more. Well, what kind of animation? Like I just had a friend do that. I have a friend whose daughter is in animation, or in college and she wants to do animation. So she's already in college and she wants to do animation. And I'm like, well, 2D, 3D. I mean, I mean, that's so generic, right? And you really have to pick your lane, you know? And if you're already in college a couple years, you know, maybe you're in the wrong lane. You know what I mean? Maybe you're on the wrong track. So, and part of it too is that, you know, every school goes, got to be careful because every school goes, when you go, oh, I really want to do anime. Oh, yeah, we do that. Yeah. You know, the recruiter for the school goes, yeah, sure. You know,
write the check. Right.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah, that does happen. I've seen students who get they get into a program and then they find out that whatever they said isn't really true, or they have an animation program but they don't have a lab. You know, they don't use Max. They don't have, you know, any of the most, not even bleeding edge, any equipment to animate with, you know.
Right. And again, when you're saying animation, are you talking about infographics, animations, and titles, or are you talking about character animation? And are you talking about 2D hand-drawn character animation, or are you talking about, you know, 3D animation? I mean, it's on you to understand a little bit more about the business. You know, I mean, there's not a lot of 2D animation done now. There's always these rumors that it's going to be coming back, but most of the shows are animated in Korea or in Canada. They're not animated here, or some are animated here, but they're rigged, you know. So it's on you as the student to do a little bit more research, and that's why I always say, when I look at people who go to medical school, well, you just say, I want to be a doctor. Well, you know, what kind of doctor, right? Because you have your general medicine, and then you have your specialty, which might mean that you're studying several years of just whatever your specialty is. So again, every year I get these letters and people want to do this, but it seems like it's such a broad question. And then you have this back and forth with them to try to get them to understand. They have to put a little bit more thought into the path that they want, because it's honestly, it's a 10-year path. It's a 10-year path, right? A 10-year path for being a student, prospective student, being a student, and being a young professional, getting out and getting several jobs. That's a, you know, for art school is at least 4 years. And then I would say it's at least 4 or 5 years when you get out to start getting work and getting regular work.
Yo, Eternity's MVP of the chat says my art school got shut down by the government.
That was the Art Institute.
Might have been Art Institute. We're not going to put Eternity's business in the street, but that's probably what it was. Art Institute.
Yeah.
Sip of coffee. I don't have my coffee. Oh no.
We had one here in Philly. We had an Art Institute here in Philly.
I had a lot of friends that went there. That.
Yeah, and I went when I was thinking of going back to get my degree. I went there and I realized, like, no, man, it was just basically like, you got a checkbook and you show up. You know, there was no, you know, like portfolio requirements and stuff like that, you know. And so I'm an autodidact because I basically taught myself everything, right? No one taught me how to draw or paint until I was 45. So I taught myself how to cartoon and all that stuff in the beginning just through study. So again, I also don't think that art school is necessarily the path everybody should take. It's probably actually the path that almost nobody should take, to be honest.
To that point, Michael Manley, our good buddy Tim Fielder, if you missed our Pencil to Pencil episode with Tim Fielder, Afrofuturist and Spiffy Dresser, Tim Fielder, Tim just checked into the chat and says, the truth is virtually any skill technically can be learned on YouTube. I never would say it to students on the job, though.
Well, why not? I think that's being honest.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that's being when I have a young friend who is going to be a dentist,
Mhm.
and when she told me that what she owed, it was astronomical, astronomical amount of money, you know. Um, but she's a dentist, and she'll make good money, and eventually she'll pay it off. But I know young people now, if you go to the same school that I went to, maybe twice what I paid.
Mhm.
And that is not, they didn't suddenly get twice more
Right.
jacked into the back of your head or something, So again, I wanted to talk about this because I think I see so many people that are either on the wrong part of the path or on the bitter part of the path. There's a lot of bitter people that come out of school.
Mhm.
You get those couple of years going by where they're not getting work or they're not happy.
Mhm.
And you're 30,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Time goes by like that. And there's also a huge part of this, and I kind of keep going back to the sticking point that there's so many columns of people who are here for all different reasons. And I know that we sometimes pencil to pencil can be a splash of cold water podcast because I think sometimes we do our great interviews with guest artists and we talk about our own careers. I feel like we're both experts in our own ways. And but when we get to boot camps or these kind of discussions, sometimes people are like, "Oh man, you guys are bumming me out. Why are you talking about all of this? How hard it is stuff?"
Well, you got to grow up. You got to be honest. You got to face what it is. I don't think anything that I'm saying is a negative thing. I'm saying
Mm,
that's the way that it is,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what I had to deal with. I think that is what anybody has to deal with. And my point in mentioning this is that if I achieved my dream, and so I know how that is, and I would hope that this information then helps other people achieve their dream. And I know it does because I've had friends and students of mine follow this and they are now achieving their dream,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I mean, both Liang and Mimi are getting work now beyond being my assistants. Part of that was following this, this mentality, this way of working, and I have other people, I've known other people, they're just not going to follow and be serious or really it's about being honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take your comic and you put your art up next to you go into the comic book store, I would say, go into comic book if you want to be a comic book artist, you go in a comic book store, put your artwork on the stand next to, I don't know, John Romita or Jim Lee or whoever you like. Is that even in the same ballpark or are you just fooling yourself?
Right.
Right? Because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people fooling themselves, just not really being honest, right?
Hmm.
Just not being honest, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm. But and there, we're like doing a point counterpoint, but I'm agreeing with everything we're talking about. Um, and I think there's really no wrong answer to however you approach things, but I think just going into it knowing that you're going to be called on to have a plan at some point, to be super drilled down and specific on what you're here for, right? Like you said earlier, you want to animate, but what kind of animation do you want to do? What skill tree do you want to follow? And there's also nothing wrong with being a fan. There's nothing wrong with being an enthusiast,
No.
right?
Again, if you're saying to yourself, okay, this is where I draw the line, right? Because I would say the majority of students are hobbyists who have a fantasy of being a professional, but will never be professionals because they're not professionally minded and don't have the skill set. But they can do it for their own enjoyment. And that's a completely different level at which you can function, because you're functioning for your own taste, your own interest, to your own satisfaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I just applied. Looks like I'm going to be working on a new project that I can't talk about, but I had to do a little tryout for it, you know. And so even at my stage and my success, sometimes you still got to show the people, oh, okay, yeah, or no.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you can be a hobbyist, right? Art school, all the continuing education classes are full of wonderful people who had careers as lawyers and doctors and mothers and fathers and bakers and firemen and policemen and everything else. And then they almost the universal story was they wanted to be an artist when they were younger and their parents said no. And then they retire or raise their kids, and then they go back to school for art, for their passion. All right. That's a completely wonderful, laudable, enjoyable thing, but it is a completely different playing field than to try to be a professional. It's like going to baseball fantasy camp or football fantasy camp and then, you know, getting down and standing across from the defensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles and they just smash the crap out of you, right? that's what would happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud people being hobbyists, but we're not talking about hobbyists. Hobbyists are with anything, any kind of endeavor. There's hobbyists, but if you're going to do it as a professional, you got to come with a different game. You can't come with the same game. You can't have excuses, you know. And what happens is a lot of people really are hobbyists, and when they graduate, they end up being hobbyists, but they thought they were going to be in the other, but they were never really on track, right? They were never really on track to be the other thing. And the older you get, the harder it becomes because your personality changes.
Mm-hmm.
You have a much more flexible personality when you're 20 than you do when you're 30, than you do when you're 40, than when you do when you're 50.
Yeah.
That's just life. So not that you can't reset. Like I was saying, that young person who was 22 was like already like, oh my God, my life is over. I'm crashing and burning. What's going on? This is terrible. You're just beginning to live at 22. And you may end up finding, like some of the people in that thread thought they were going to be one thing and they ended up being something else and being very happy.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the whole point.
Right.
You'd say you wanted to be a comic book artist, but you ended up being a veterinarian. Well, if you're happy, well, then that's a win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, to speak a little bit about that, there's so many middles here. What about, Mike, we can discuss the starting late artists. Just kind of to your example, say you finished your career, you put in your time, doing whatever your first career
was. Define late, right? Define, because we talked about this before, and I think people were getting like...
People getting salty.
But again, I'm only talking from my experience, right? And been in the business a long time and was, trying to get in the business for 10 years, right? From the time I said, I want to be a comic book artist till I actually earned my first check. That was like a 10-year stretch, right? So you have to sort of define that, because there's people that can start in their 30s and are experienced enough and have the right mentality and the right attitude and work ethic, and are successful. I've heard of guys that work for Disney, never went to any art school, and were autodidacts like me and trained themselves and were good enough to get a job. So there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, I would say once you start pushing 30, it becomes harder.
Mm-hmm.
Not impossible, but harder. Now, again, I'm talking about a person who wants to make their living every day by drawing for a living, not a person who wants to draw on the weekends or draw once a month or draw when they go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great, that's fine. You were going to make your main nut doing this, drawing every day. And also, there's different aspects of that because you can find a job working at Disney that wouldn't be animating, color key, doing backgrounds, doing other technical things in the art department.
Mm-hmm.
So you're an artist or you're working in an artistic realm, but you're not a lead animator. There's people that write software, right? So there's a lot of different, especially in animation. It's a very broad field, and there's a lot of places that you could find. But I remember there was a student I knew very well, and I knew her from when she was in my high school class, and I knew all the way to when she graduated from college, and she was having a hard time at the end. And I told her, it was okay if she didn't do this for a living, but just did it for her own enjoyment. And that made a big difference to her because none of the other teachers had ever told her that. So she was feeling inadequate and feeling all this pressure and knowing that she's going to graduate and knowing, all this stuff was going on. Right. And it was driving her, making her very sad, depressed, and anxious. So it might be that this is a fit for you, but as a hobby, as an enjoyment, not as a vacation, and that's fine.
That's quite okay, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? I mean, it's like, I might like to do, I don't know, banjo playing, play an instrument. I'm not going to be a professional, but I can play for my own enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother's a professional, right? I'm not going to be a professional musician, but I could play around with it for my own enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if I was going to be a professional musician, I'd have to, learn to read music. There's all these other things, get my skills set up so that I could,
Mm-hmm.
play with the other people, be
Right.
proficient enough to play with the other people.
And one thing we had talked about in the past when we brought up the kind of starting or coming into this profession later in life is that I'd hate to say this is a young person's game because it is what it isn't, but it is what it isn't. The more things that you have as resistance make it harder to just do it, right? Like, you having a young family makes it harder for you to have the energy to stay up all night drawing pages when you're chasing a toddler around, right? Or you have a full-blown family and that Saturday is precious.
Or you got alimony. You got one wife, and then you got another family you're paying child support.
Or you have a secret family across town.
Right. I mean, I just look at the students that I was teaching when I first started teaching in the early 2000s. They're all around 40 or a little bit over now, right? And you see what happens to them. The people that went on, the people that didn't go on, you get a family, you get married, maybe you're married already, divorced and married again, right? I mean, all those things are serious things that you have to take into consideration. So that's what I'm saying. All these things I'm talking about are not things that are meant to be negative, but are things that are meant to inform you so that you can make better choices and identify where you are on the path, right? So I think when you're in high school, you really need to plan to go to art school. And you need to plan what art school you're going to for the kind of art that you want to do. And there's certain schools that are good at certain things and certain schools that are not good at certain things. But it's on you, just like I said, people who go to medical school, if you're going to go and become a childhood oncologist, that's one type of school. If you're going to be, eye surgeon, that's another kind of school. You all have to do your general med, and then you do your specialty. Well, art school is the same way. Certain schools are going to be good for certain things. Other schools are not going to be good for certain things, right? And so you really have to do your homework. You also have to know artists, because very often I would meet a young artist and they would say, I want to do animation. And I said, well, do you know any animators? And they don't know any animators. Can't name one animator. Walt Disney was not an animator. After a certain while, it was all eye work. So when Walt Disney was not sitting down and drawing anything, right? So you have to invest and be serious, right? Because if you're going to be an animator, all the animators that I know, new animators. I mean, I knew animators. I thought about being an animator, and I knew animators.
Yeah.
Right. So just like if you're going to be a comic book artist, you know your favorite artists, right? Oh, I like Jim Lee, or I like John Byrne, or I like, whoever, Mike Mignola, whoever. You have your favorites, right? Well, it's the same way with animation. You have to know the people in the game, and then that helps you inform your choices. It helps you understand what you want to do, what you like, what is your goal. If you want to be an animator, it's difficult. There are still people that do 2D animation, but every one of those people could tell you their favorite animators and their favorite cartoons, and they're really deep into it. And then the great thing now is that it's much easier to find information because of the internet. I found information because I bought a VCR as a teenager and recorded stuff and would look at the credits. So then I knew, okay, these people worked on these cartoons, and these are the cartoons that I like. So I like these people, right?
But when I watch Crunchyroll, the credits go like this, and then it's over.
Right. And so, that's the thing. You can like anime, but you're probably never going to work on an anime unless the studios in America start actually animating anime here. All that stuff is still done overseas. So you might be able to board on it, or design on it, do character design on it. You might work for Netflix, but even if you work for Netflix, the animation is usually done overseas. So again, it's upon you to learn, to study, to know this stuff. It can't just be so uninformed, and then you hope that despite that, you will end up where you want to be.
Eternity says Chris Rock said he only wanted to see people who were into comedy or were comedians when preparing for a stand-up.
Right, because he was a geek for stand-up, right? When you see these guys that are great stand-up comedians like him and Seinfeld and Dave Chappelle, those guys knew who were the good old comedians and the up-and-coming comedians. They knew the history of the medium.
Right. It's almost like you study the masters, right? And to be one, you have to immerse yourself in that. And I think it's always a little weird to us to see people who get so far into liking something but not knowing where it comes from. I don't know if that's just a modern problem. When we were younger and there was less stuff, maybe it was easier to focus. But I still feel like if you're going to do something at a high level, you should know the players.
Well, right. I'm always big on history, right? History of comics, history of animation, because you're affected by the history. Your likes and dislikes are formed by that information. So you can either learn it, then it's useful to you, or you can not learn it, and then it's not useful to you. And one of the things about these mediums, is that the people who work in these mediums are very passionate about it.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a director and he art director, whatever, or another artist, and they say, "Oh, that sequence that film, that artist, this thing, and you go, okay, what is that? Already you're kind of like a little bit out of step, right? You're a little bit out of step, you know. If you're on a team, and animation is a team sport, right? Unless you're Bill Plimpton, and even he had people helping him.
Yeah.
It's a team sport, and so you're on the team. The team hopes that you're on the team,
Right.
right? So I think you start as a teenager, you have your dream, then you have to really put the work in to figure out where you want to go to school, who are your likes, what are the teachers in the school? Is that a good school? You can talk to professionals that you like. What school did they go to? Then you're in the school, and then you have to be professional minded in the school. It's on you to learn and to push the school to teach you the skills that you want. Some schools are really good at it, and some schools are bad. I think the thing now I would recommend to most young people is to not go to art school and take 2 or 3 years and go to these ateliers and take those classes to build up your skill set so that if you do decide to go on and go to school, you're got basics down, like perspective, some basic anatomy, understanding composition, things like that. Because what happens is a lot of people start really far back. And then even by the 4th year, you're still way far back. Right. And then it's too late. Then it's like, then you got to graduate, and then you got to still get that basic stuff, which becomes, in my experience, increasingly hard because of people's personalities. You know, by the time you're 25, your personality is pretty formed. You know, and if you don't have good disciplines, it is so much harder to develop them the older that you get. It's so much harder at 30 to break a bad habit than it is at 15.
You know, I was thinking about what we were talking about earlier, just about drive, and I keep coming back, and I said this to Tim in the chat. All of this stuff is fantastic, but if you can't put your butt in a chair, none of this matters. You know what I mean? You could be subscribed to 1,000 YouTube channels and have every book and every comic and everything and your favorite, bag of Takis and a fresh Mountain Dew on your table. But if you're in another room watching TV, you're not drawing. You know what I mean?
Well, again, that touches on that point we're always talking about. The line between the hobbyist and the professional.
Yeah.
The aspiring professional, right? Because this job requires ass and seat, period. And there's that point at which you go through where it's like we're all used to drawing what we want, what we like, when we want to draw it, and then we're done. That's a hobby, right? I had fun today. I sat down and I drew whatever, right? And then great. And then you I think I'm gonna go do something else, right? Right. Again, right? There are many points during the day when I wish I could say that, but I can't, right? And if you're working on a team, especially in animation, and you're at some point along the production, you got to do your thing so somebody else can do their thing. Or, you've got to be able to put yourself in the seat. And that really is personality. It's a personality that allows you to do that because you love it. Or personality that goes like, man, I cannot sit still for 5 hours.
Right.
I gotta go outside.
Right. And if that's kind of how you're built, then that's what it is, right?
Right. So I again, it's like you try to be honest with people. You try to give people a guide or a plan, but in the end, it's really up to you, right? And then up to your personality. If you're not a person who can work for more than 3 or 4 hours and you got to get up and go, it's probably not the job for you. It's probably a great hobby for you, but it's probably not a job for you. There's probably something else that you could sit there and do for 8 hours a day.
Right. Our buddy Amani Latif has entered the chat. Amani is a fantastic cartoonist and also the owner of Peep Game Comics. Monty says, I think that's the real purpose of an instructor in a traditional institution. You're there to hold them accountable. Thoughts to that, Mike?
I don't know if I held my students. I mean, you have to hold them accountable to turn in their grades, and do the assignment, turn in their homework or do their assignment, and attend class. But the people who are really meant to do this, you never have to worry about that because they're in every class. They do all their work. They ask you for more, right? And then you have the other people who talk the talk but never walk the walk. They're not in every class. Half the class, they don't have their tools, right? Half the class, they don't have their homework. That's too many students, right? In the old days at an atelier, or if you were an assistant, you'd show up at 8 o'clock, do whatever the master wanted you to do, do whatever the senior artist wanted you to do. If you showed up late 3 days in a row, gone.
Mm-hmm.
Out. Somebody else would take your place. Now that's very honest. That's very honest. But art schools don't like to do that because they want the tuition. And if every kid's $40,000 to $60,000 worth of tuition every year, and you kick out half of them, that's a lot of money, right? And they go, can't operate on that, right? So they try to find ways that you can do things to keep that student in class, when in reality, to be fair and honest with that person, you would expel them. And they would go on and find whatever else in their life they would be really good at, but it wouldn't be this.
D. Brad asks, there's so much to choose from in the chat right now. D. Brad asks, question, how do you take a break and recharge throughout a long drawing day? Mike, you want to go first?
If you go drink a cup of coffee, check your email, maybe you scroll on Instagram, you answer some messages or something on Facebook. I think I'm such a completely different beast now, having done it for so long, that I've trained myself to be able to just plop and go, right? Occasionally I'm working on something that's not interesting to work on. So, you might get a little bit more restless, but I mean, I'm trained to the point that I have to meet the task. But I know a lot of people struggle with that in the beginning. And so I say, block your time, right? I got to get this done by today. And it takes a while to sort of figure out how long it takes you to do something. Then you just literally have to say, okay, I'm going to sit here for 3 hours and I'm not going to look at my Instagram. I'm not going to answer my cell phone. Maybe I just put on some music or whatever. Just sit there and work. And then ding, you can take your break, your 15 minutes, just like you were in a job. See, that's the hard part when you're a freelance, right? Because your boss is not like, yo, Manley's been gone to the bathroom a long time. What's going on over there? Right? What the hell's going, right? It's up to me, right? And even on this new project that I'm going to work on, it's like when I worked at Warner Brothers, I was on staff long distance.
Mm-hmm.
So it was up to me to make sure that I did the required amount of work every week. Now we're at different time, zones. What mattered was that when that storyboard or background or whatever was due, whatever they needed at the end of the day or at the end of the week or whatever, I turned it in. They are not going to keep calling me and go, hey, where is it? Hey, where is it? Can you show me? Can you show me? Can you show me? It's on me. So again, you have to sort of work out these things for your personality. If you're an itchy type of person, maybe you got to get up in the morning and go for a 5-mile run and get your itchiness out. I don't know. You know what I mean? I've known all kinds of other people. The one thing I will say is that Al Williamson told me this is his observation about me, that I was the only artist he ever knew that would actually come in to the studio, sit down, pick up a pencil, and just start drawing.
You weren't bullshitting half the morning?
Yeah. I guess Al would sort of, have his little routines, and other people he'd worked with or known over the years would have routines. But yeah, I guess I was never precious about it. It's just like, oh, I have to do this, so I just sit down and go.
Mm.
And I know some guys who don't work at night. They just work like Al was like that. He just worked during the day. So he'd get up early, but he wouldn't work rarely would he work at night. And Blevins doesn't really work at night, although he used to work at night. So I know some people that only can work during the day and they never work at night. They like their night is for their family.
Yeah.
Or whatever else they want to do.
For me, kind of to what Mike was saying, it's a lot of, especially when you're really on the hustle, you have enough time to kind of like take a flex break. Like you let me get this panel in, or let me finish this page, or let me finish whatever the sequence is, and you may just kind of get up and stretch. I'll walk the dog, or I'll like look at something else that's not a screen for a minute. Stretch out the hands a little bit, then you kind of get back to it.
And then you go, what the hell did I draw? It's crap. And you erase it out.
It's so much erasing. But I mean, really, that's it. Especially when you're playing beat the clock. The thing you don't have is time to take a break or recharge. You just got to get through it or plow through it.
I guess I'm lucky that I don't love video games, and I don't love. I played video games, but I would say that my most video game playing era was back during the first part of PlayStation 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I never loved it to the point where, like, I hear people that are like totally addicted to like World of Warcraft and all these other things, and there's like Candy Crush or whatever, and they're like playing hours a day. And I guess it just, as much as I do like that stuff, I don't like it more than what I do for a living. And I would not want to sacrifice what I like doing to play a video game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we had Mike Mayhack on, and we were kind of like doing a defense of video games. I think, I'm a game guy. I won't say I'm a gamer anymore. It's not really my stance, but I unwind in that way. Like I'm going to play Miss Pac-Man for, a round, and then I'll just go do something. But I think video games and what you're doing in a lot of senses kind of occupy the same space. Like you can only do one or the other, depending on what kind of stuff you're into.
It might, and I'm like, 10 years older than you. So,
Mm-hmm.
That might also be the difference too, because I think that, video games were better for you and our buddy Scott and my brother Mark when you were younger.
Yeah.
And I think that while I enjoyed them and I liked playing Grand Theft Auto and blowing up stuff and whatever on some of the racing games or whatever, it was not
It didn't
enough.
hold you. It didn't hold you. Right?
Yeah, it was not as satisfying. For me, the most satisfying thing in all things is to do a drawing or a painting that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm so, I'm such a zealot. I'm so committed to that I don't have enough room to share, right? Like if I sat downstairs, like I've seen some of the new Star Wars games and stuff, like, oh, it would be fun. And then I think, okay, I sat downstairs and I played for that for like, I don't know, 90 minutes. Well, I could do another wind down sketch. And so if I just compare the two things,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing video games. I'm just saying for me,
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have a drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like to unwind doing a drawing,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm very addicted to drawing as a pleasure as an occupation and as a pursuit. And so I realize that I'm probably really different than some people, because some people are like, they work to a point and they're like,
Done. Pencil down.
right. If I could like not sleep and just continually draw forever, I would do that perfect.
I have this genie bottle. Just rub it, and we can make that happen.
So yeah, so I don't know, but I would say that is something that you have to find a solution to as a professional, however it works for you, because any job requires at least 10, 12 hours a day. I don't know any working artist that does not put
Yeah.
in 10 hours a day at this job.
At
I don't know,
least.
maybe if you're drawing mutts or something, you can draw your stuff like real simple and fast. You can sit down and draw it like, you know what I mean? Like if you're doing that kind of cartooning,
Yeah.
where you're not like drawing anatomy and perspective and, cars and, ornate backgrounds and buildings. Okay, you might be able to sit down and draw your thing and do it in, 3 hours, and you got your week's worth of stuff. But my work is not like that. And I'm not interested in producing work that is like that. I'm always interested in producing work that is a challenge to me. The constant challenge is like Sisyphus, always pushing the rock up the hill.
Go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
Eternity Forever is going to run the table on questions and keep them coming. The chat is lit, y'all. Eternity says, how do you guys keep from being injured as a professional? Brian Lee O'Malley is injured. Manga artists literally die from overwork. That the Japanese have a word for it. I know what you're talking about.
And then you fall over face first on your desk.
I guess when you should probably at this point be in tune with your body enough to know when you have the claw death grip because you're inking, like you're lettering, and you're starting to feel that pressure. I know a lot of people that have hand and wrist issues.
Yeah, what's funny is that, or it's not funny, but I know a lot of young artists, including my two former assistants, who are now in their mid-20s, and they're like, oh, my back, oh, my arm, oh, my hand, oh, my leg.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went from the young, supple teenager, to like, oh, slowly transforming. You're like, you started, you go from
turn into Gollum.
yeah, exactly. You're slowly turning into Gollum. So I think it's important to know what your limit is, right? If it hurts, stop and figure out another way to do it. We're just talking to somebody who was having problems with their hand and their shoulder, which is a very common thing now because everybody working on their tablet.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, a long time ago, we gave it might have been Mike Hawthorne who was on. We had him as a guest, and he was talking about daily stretches that he does, and those things are good for you just to keep limber.
Do you really need legs? No, you just need a cart that you can slide, or just a bucket next to your desk to go number 1 and number 2. You don't need legs to draw. You just need only one hand, actually, just one hand. There's one deformed claw that can hold your.
I will say that we all feel it in different ways, but you want to try to fight some of that stuff. You see a lot of older cartoonists who have the hunchback from being bent over a table so long, and you fight that with trying to keep your posture straight. You do your stretches, try to even change your drawing posture if you can. Like there's a couple of our buddies who have like super dope ergonomic chairs, or maybe they stand up and draw, or you lay on the floor and draw. Well, kind of whatever you need to do, either to prevent further injuries or just to know that you can do 5 hours at the table if you draw with the thing straight up versus being hunched over. One thing for me, probably the biggest purchase I made in the last couple of years, I got a really nice chair, and I think that's super important.
Does it talk to you? Oh, Jamar.
Does it talk to me? Ooh, those soothing fingers.
Yeah.
But and also, I know I've been looking into maybe getting some sort of brace. I draw a lot of stuff digitally, but I don't use that like half glove. It just bothers me, and
I tried that, but it just wouldn't work for me.
my hands are too big. I always got to cut the fingers out.
I bought one, but I didn't feel it made it more difficult to draw, and it did not benefit. I mean, I don't have a problem with my hand, luckily.
Yeah.
But I figured out a way of having my rig set up.
Look, I just cut the fingers out.
Oh, I see. That's like some, you're gonna like some Tom Cruise thing, like Minority Report. Is how you're drawing now. You're moving things around.
Right, and it's just like kind of whatever you need to do.
Oh, you were in Dune. You had one of them faces in the glove.
That's crazy. But any other? I mean, especially Mike. We talk so much about ass in chair. How do you keep from like, I don't know, getting bed sores and shit? Like that's real stuff. Like you do have to get up. But
well, I'm not like in the chair, and they got to get my orderly come and rotate me. Hold on, Mr. Manley, let me move you. So I get a bed sore. No, I mean I get up. I've been trying to exercise more, and I ride my stationary bike, and it's hard in the winter because it's in the winter. You just want to eat gravy and sleep. But yeah, I mean, everybody has to figure out what works for you, right? Because there's no two cartoonists with the same back. No cartoonists have the same setup. Yeah, I got my shot. Get all my shots in my.
That's right. You can't have Tetsuo arm when you got pain.
Like, well, hey, I can still use this one. It's fine.
Tetsuo. When you got Tetsuo arm, when you got pages due, so get it in the left. Thanks, Shelly. That's great. Let's see. Oh, also Shelly says, and hello, Shelly. Welcome to the podcast. We've seen you around a little bit. Fantastic cartoonist. Love to have you on the show. Says, that's why I want an iPad so I can sit and move to different places. Mike, do you take your show on the road at all? Do you ever kind of move your setup or,
No, our buddy Scott was trying to get me to get an iPad, and I Mimi used to have an iPad, but I don't know if I would ever use it. I mean, I could get one, but I don't know if I would use it because the other thing, so like having a piece of paper. I like paper. I like drawing on paper. I like the feel of paper. So I on one hand, I imagine, I could get an iPad and I could sit there and watch TV at night and then draw on the iPad. But if I did something I really liked, then I would like, oh man, I wish that was on.
Mm-hmm.
That was on paper. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of it is just because I like traditional things. I like having a piece of artwork that on paper, I work digital all the time because I do ink phantom and I draw and do the judge digitally. So I do a lot of digital stuff, but I don't know, when I'm drawing for myself, I don't know whether I would ever use it because I can sit there on the couch with a sketch pad.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Amani asked a really good question. Let me pull it up. Amani says, and thank you guys all for hanging out with us tonight. This was a really cool time. As I say all the time, Mike, where does the time go? Shit, what happened to it? All right, hold on. Maybe I went the wrong direction. Okay, Amani asks, has podcasting become a relaxing diversion for you all? Mike, what do you think about
You go first. You go first. You go first.
Well, I'll say yes. It has been for me. There's, and maybe Mike could speak on this more than I can, like self identify. There's a part of my personality that enjoys this. I like being like on my feet and thinking quickly and ADHD, arms of Vishnuing. Um, but there's also some times where I feel like I'm doing too much or too many. Like I have a couple of things I'm doing all at the same time. So I think what
You do
makes
Mike, too, right? You do it with Hawthorne, right?
yeah, I have this. I have my Patreon exclusive things. One of those is with Mike Hawthorne. I have the coffee break. I have this, and they all kind of serve their own purposes. So for me, it does mellow me out. Like I love pencil to pencil because I get to do something with Mike. And I also like talking to contemporaries and things like that, which is also super cool. Like coffee break because it's a different vibe, and I could just kind of riff with the caffeines. Like they all do something different for me. I know there's a lot of people that go, dude, that's so much stuff. How do you do all this stuff? But it's just again, it's like me leaning into parts of my personality or my charisma or whatever that kind of cool me out. And I like bouncing off of other people's energy. Mike, what about you?
I like doing this. Occasionally, I would do some other things where I would do a live thing. I haven't done that in a while, where I would
Mm-hmm.
draw at night. Um, but I like doing this because I like talking to other artists about their process. I've always been very fascinated about that, which is why I did the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the beginning, I felt a little bit more tense about it, but now doing it in our going into our third pandemic year, you get used to it. I mean, because I figured this way: either people are going to be interested or they're not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm not here trying to uh,
Sell them
sell.
turtle wax.
No, I mean we've even talked about that. I mean, I'm not. I'm an artist who's interested in comics, and I'm interested in comic art, but I'm not a fan of comics in the way that many people are fans.
Mm-hmm.
They like to have all these issues of such and such or all this stuff. I'm interested in it as a fan. Like I don't have any comics that I don't like the art. You know what I mean? I don't buy comics that I don't like the art. So as a professional, it's different. I'm curious to buy the Thing series when they collect it that's being written by Walter Mosley because I love his books. So I'm sort of interested in buying that from Walter Mosley, but in general, I never buy comic books for writers because I only buy it for the art. If I don't like the art, I don't care who would draw it, right? So I'm different. So I'm not interested in like Grail issues, or I'm not interested. There's a lot of podcasts that are really dedicated to that aspect of the business or the hobby, which is great. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have my favorite issues by favorite artists, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in discussing the art,
Mm-hmm.
craft. That's what interests me. You know.
I think that's what sets this project apart from other things, and we've talked about this on and off camera. And I also think it has a lot to do with who our audience is. It's very specific. It's rare that we're going to talk about, if we do at all, about what's going on in the comic book world, unless it delves into the business part. Right.
Well, yeah, like in a general sense, like I don't care about 52 or Crisis on Infinite Earths or that kind of a thing.
Right.
And there's a lot of fandom that's what they're interested in, but that's not what I'm interested in.
Right. Now, this is a little different from Mike's answer, which I think makes our pairing so good, is that I totally agree with Mike as far as the podcast goes and kind of what our content is. I'm really fascinated, yes, with the art, and this more is about our guests. Yes, about the art, but also about the journey. That is a big thing to me. I love documentaries and I like learning about how people got from one place to the other. And the craft is super important, but also the hustle is super important to me. And everybody's got a different story that makes it to the podcast, right? I think if you zoom out and look at it as, oh well, all you guys are illustrators, so I guess you all kind of did the same thing at some point to get there, but it's not exactly true. I like people who are trailblazers, people who created their own lane, people who made something from nothing, and getting to share their stories with you, I think is really enriching. So that's another thing I get out of Pencil to Pencil, and I hope you guys enjoy that aspect of the show. Thank you. There's another question in here, Mike. Oh man, I'm losing all my questions. Okay. Sergeant Dill reported for duty. Sergeant. Well, we need to do a boot camp, Mike. We have to talk about boot camp because I think people are afraid of boot camp. Sergeant Dill says, some days we have good days or bad days, but I don't want to sound harsh. But how do you know if you just suck? How can one suck less, Mike Manley? Do you have an answer for that really good question?
I think we were sort of talking about that earlier. Is being honest. You have to have honesty. You have to be brutally honest with yourself, right? And it's a very hard thing to do. Especially, like when you're in school or you're showing samples, the teacher will go, well, this is pretty good, but this is not working. And if you're fortunate and you have a good teacher, they might show you how to literally fix what you did wrong, right? Mm-hmm. When you're showing your samples, people are kind of go, right? That's all you get. You get the 1 second, right? If you're lucky and you're at a con and you show it to somebody, they look through and they're like, well, this, whatever, blah, blah. People say the 5 things, you need to work on your storytelling. You need to work on your anatomy, yada, yada, yada. But you really have to be honest with yourself, which goes to that point I was talking about where you take your art and you put it on the shelf of the comic book store and you go, here's John Romita Jr. Here's my stuff. Here's Sean Phillips. Here's my stuff. Whoever your God is, right? You look at it. What is lacking, right? If you cannot be honest, you cannot be honest, then that's really on you, right? It's not on your teacher. It's not on the editor. It's on you. You have to be able to be self-critical enough. And it does help if somebody points something out. But even if somebody goes, you make your heads too big. Okay, and you could write down, make my head's too big. Well, what does that mean? Proportion. Okay. Do I make all heads too big? Am I making the head too big? Or am I making the body too small? You know what I mean? You have to really think about these things. Like when I was younger, I'd go to a convention and somebody would say something like, your neck is too short or whatever. And I would like write that stuff down. And then when I would go home, I would stick that stuff up on my board. So it's kind of on you. You have to really be honest, and it's hard because, you're trying to juggle a lot of things to do comics, not just drawing, storytelling. Maybe you're too heavy-handed with your pencils. Mm-hmm. Or you're too heavy-handed with your ink. You're inking socks. Your pencil's okay, but your inking socks. Like I see a lot of young people ruin their artwork because they're not good at inking. Their
Mm-hmm.
penciling is not great, but it's better than when they ink it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's about being honest, because you will be a professional artist longer than you will ever be a student. A student is 4 years, and only a certain amount of time out of that 4 years, right? Sometimes you might have one class once a week, right? And then next week you have that class again. You might have storytelling with somebody, or you might have drawing with somebody, right? And you get 16 weeks of that. And then next year you don't get that, you get something else, right? So it really is upon you to be honest with yourself, you know. And then when someone gives you a critique, or you go, wow, wow, my stuff doesn't look clear. You have to like really be analytical about it, you know. It's hard with art. It's really easy with music. You're gonna play that song and it sounds good. Wow. Oh my God, that is so fucking horrible. That is the worst version of, Blackbird I've ever heard. But with art, a lot of it is, no, that's my style. You mean you get a lot of people to say that's my style. And then they want to argue with you because it's well, it doesn't matter your style. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Of style, So that's the hard part about art, right?
Mm-hmm.
In medical school, screw up, you're out. In music school, if you can't play it, we hear all the sour notes, right? We hear the fact that you're not proficient at being able to play very well. With art, there's a lot of lawyering. It's my style, it's this, it's that,
Mm-hmm.
People get in little camps. That's another danger of art school. You could be in the camp where the people are kind of sour and everybody sucks and that teacher sucks and that person's mean.
Oh, the salt camp.
Right.
The salt
And
mine.
it was interesting, I suppose, because I was teaching. I was a professional, but I was also a student, all at the same time there for that time I was in school. So I would see the salty student who was salty at me because I didn't give him an A on something that wasn't good. I would see students who were my friends who would also get salty, and other people, young people, because they were all younger than me for the most part, would also get salty, at the teachers. And I said, you don't want to get in that. You don't want to get in that salty camp. If you're unhappy with the teacher, or you don't feel the teacher's doing a good job, you go up to the teacher and you go, look, here's my complaint. I'm unhappy with this because of this. As an adult, you're an adult. You're not exactly. No salt. Because if you're the salty person, nobody wants to fucking help you. And the people that are sinking want all the salty people they can get. They want every crybaby on their train,
How did we get here? There was this might be a spicy question for the evening, and I'd love to hear your answer. And I might have a comment also, but
with another salty question or another.
Oh well, I'm gonna make a track switch, like the John in the middle of the train tracks where it goes like that. Amani just asked, as an instructor, have you ever felt regret about how you may have misdirected a student? Well, I'll answer that. I don't think I've ever misdirected a student in my years teaching. I think that I've had some students who did not listen to anything I had to say, which is probably less about me trying to steer them in they crash into a wall. But it's kind of one of those things where you feel like you can reach who you reach if you get one student that comes out of a class that goes, that's a success, right? But to that point, I remember when I was in art school, we kind of I came from the pirate ship era of being at art school in the late 80s, early 90s, where you had professors that would say there's just the illest shit to you. And and it was whatever they said went. Like I remember I had an instructor that said, all of you guys who put your work up on this board for this crit, just take them down and go over to the bursar's office and ask for a refund, because all of you suck and need to just leave art school immediately.
He was salty. He had a little sriracha put in that one.
a little hot sauce on that, right? And you can't talk like that to students anymore in art school, because you'll be in front of the dean real fast, or you'll have harshly written letters from parents. There's more at stake in art school the way there didn't used to be when I was there. I had instructors that would rip up people's work and throw it out the window. You'd watch it flutter down to the street.
Yeah, it's funny because I would not say that I've ever steered a student wrong.
Yeah.
I've had students that I know didn't like me because I was not.
You're mean.
Right, I was mean.
You're mean.
No, right. Just being honest. And usually my charge, what I try to do is find out what each person is interested in doing, and then try to give them a path to achieve what they're saying their goal is, right? Now, I had my first year teaching, I had a student who really didn't like me, very angry, tried to get the other students to not like me. And then a couple years later, he graduated and he had a job, and he came back and he actually told me that everything that I told him was right. That what I was telling him was right, and he was just basically too immature to listen to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so and the reason I'm saying this is because I remember having that type of a teacher when I was in high school, as we talked about before, the fine art teacher, right? And so the first day she saw that I liked to draw comics, and she was like, "Oh, you're one of those artists, right?" And so she and I just fucking battled all through it. And I was a very serious person about doing art, where in high school, our class was a goof off class. Right. So I always remember the fact that here I was, a serious minded person wanting to do art, and she just capped on me the whole time. Instead of trying to say, well, I know you like this. Have you ever looked at this other stuff? Right. And so what I try to do, especially since I teach high school students, and you like anime, right? And in college, no anime. You see a lot of the teachers hate that stuff. But I don't hate anime. And because I remember being younger and having my teacher basically be an asshole, I don't try to do that. You can like what you like. And then what I try to do is say, oh, you like this. I try to lead them from that to other stuff. You can still go on here and like anime. And if you just want to stay liking anime, man, that's cool. That's cool.
All roads lead to Tezuka.
Yeah, when I was teaching at the school that Hawthorne is teaching at now, they wanted me to come out and teach. And I did. And then a couple of the students in the school did the same thing. They didn't like that I didn't shine their stuff. And they went and complained to the dean. And after I talked to the dean, I went into him and I just called them all out. And like, you want me to come and teach your class? Happy to do it. If you want me to lie to you, take your money and lie to you and say everything is great, then you can just have anybody teach you the class, because that's not how the real world works, And I'm sure those couple bitter bees, are still bitter. You know, I don't see their name on anything. So again, I don't think they're working, right? So no, I don't think I've ever steered. In fact, what I try to do is be very direct and honest in the beginning. My policy is by the second week of class, you are already behind on your first week. My feeling is that it's an 80% chance that you are probably going to fail the class based upon my experience as a teacher. Because by the third week, you still don't have your by the fourth week, you know what I mean? You're a couple assignments behind.
Oh, it's a
And
wrong.
not only the class that I have, but the other classes. And then it just leads to this like really bad outcome, right? You're not really learning. You have a bad attitude, or you have all this agita, about not having the work. You're not prepared to do the work. 16 weeks is not a long time. It's not a long time to try to learn something that's really complex to learn. So if you're going to like half the time you don't got your art supplies, and then you don't have your assignment, and then good, it's like, oh my God, why are you doing this? And many, many, many students I advise just drop the class and come back next year.
Yeah, you got me with that. I just had these flashbacks of the vibrating student. There's always one, like, the energy's messed up. They never have their shit. They got a million excuses. They're mad at you. They're mad at you because you're calling them on their shit. I had a one student who missed their crit, like their final crit. Like, I was locking the door to the studio, and I put my bag on, put my coat on, and I see this cab pull up to the front of the school, and the student jumps out with like shit fall. It was like a comedy skit. Papers were floating down the street, and she ran into the school. There you are. Yep, right here. Where were you? Oh, well, I'm here. Can we do a crit? Like, bro, you missed it. You're supposed to be here at 1 o'clock. It's 4:30. I don't know what to tell you. And that then I'm an asshole. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of the world, like, especially where we live at now as teachers. It's so misdirected against us. Like, oh, you're mean, Mike. Why are you need to change your teaching style because the students don't like you.
Well, see, I would never do that. I would never do that. Number one, I'm not mean, and number two, I would never change my teaching style, which was my point to the dean when I talked to them, was that I'm not being mean. I'm just being honest. If this is a terrible oval ellipse on a bicycle, right? There's a way of drawing an ellipse correctly, and there's a million ways of drawing an ellipse incorrectly.
Mhm.
Right? This is the way you do it, right? And there's a certain way to do it. Now, if I'm just supposed to say, yeah, that looks great, well, then I'm lying to the student. And if I'm lying to the student and that student's paying all that money and they're thinking, oh, I'm advancing, I'm going forward, my teacher likes it. And then they graduate and nobody hires them, they're going to feel betrayed. I know a lot of betrayed people. I know a lot of betrayed students. I know a lot of students who feel, well, they went all the way through and now they sort of feel betrayed. Now they sort of feel like I spent all that money, And again, part of it is that whole, it's all bundled up, right? Because if you fail one class, like in my class, if you fail my class, you can graduate. You had to come back. Take it again.
Well, listen, Mike, let's not be hasty. Maybe we could find a way to move their grade up a little bit, right? Maybe we could give them a makeup test or another final.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's so dishonest because if you showed up late to McDonald's every day and you didn't bring the McDonald's shirt, they'd fire you in a week. It wouldn't be like, well, now we can find some other kind of shirt for them to wear, or we'll set up some kind of other. No, that's not, that's not how the world works. And I feel, honestly, I feel, uh, I would feel like a criminal if I was lying and I just shining the students on and saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, this thing that's not very good is really good because I want you to be my friend or I want you to like me." No,
Right.
that's not, and we both know a lot of people that went through art school are not still got that debt. They're still shoveling that money out every month. No, I can't do that. So no, I'm very uh that's how why that's where the magazine came from. That's where this podcast comes from. So I feel a responsibility to sort of pay it forward, and I feel a responsibility to be always to be honest with my student, and I will help them if they're willing to do the work, but I'm not willing to lie to anybody and tell them that something that is bad is good. That's
Mhm.
just not that's not. And you know what? Because you don't do it in music school, right? You don't say that this person who went to music school, who can't play and can't sing, great,
Mhm.
you're awesome, and you don't do it in medical school because if you mess up in medical school, you kill somebody. You'd give them sepsis or something. You know what I mean? They don't. They have very strict standards, and I honestly feel that art schools need to be completely reshaped. So we have these very strict standards where you don't really go to the next year until you can demonstrate that you've learned whatever task it is that you need to know for that year. Because
Mhm.
then when you go to the next year, you can build on that.
Mhm.
Why have these outcomes where you have these students who spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars and graduate with so many hindrances to their chance of being successful in the future,
Well, Mike, let's we're kind of running out of time, but I'm enjoying what we're talking about. And I also want to add, and this is interesting because Sergeant Dill asked, so is art school a scam now with crazy tuition and babying students? I want to say, I want to say just in a balanced way that from a student side, they say youth is wasted on the young. In any place you put 30 people in a room, everybody's there for a different reason, right? You might have the super serious student with who's got all the sharpened pencils up in a row, and they're like this the whole time waiting. You got the kids that don't even show up, right? I've had students who've missed like weeks of class, and they show up right around the time midterms, and they go, "Yo, how can I catch up?" You know what I mean? It goes from A to Z with types of students you have. So, especially in any educational place, you get what you put into it. You get back what you put into it, right? And if you're not really prepared to be there, it's going to show in the final. But also, we both know, Mike, that sometimes your reviews as a professor, get dictated by how the students feel about you, and it's not always fair.
I guess I never really worried about that, to be honest.
Well, I mean, not to say that any of us do, but it does sting when you get things back, like because a young student is going to take whatever they feel applies to them and try to either get back at you or whatever they want to do in that review to kind of stick it to you.
Like I said, I think if you're at a good school and the people write, meaner, chicken dinner, Mike Manley sucks. All right, that sounds like an immature person. If you have very specific grievances,
Hmm.
examples of how I was unfair to you, or I didn't help you, or I didn't show you,
Right, show your work if that's what you're going to write.
okay. But I know that I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah,
And
sure.
if and if the third floor or the administration was like that, then I would want to teach at the school. I don't need to teach. I teach because I think it's important for people of experience to share that knowledge
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I, you know, I don't. I'm not teaching anything right now because of the pandemic. I don't know whether I'll go back in the future, but yeah, no, I don't. I don't teach from that situation. I've had far too many good experiences as a teacher, despite the few. examples that I mentioned. And so I like to teach. So, but yeah, my question is that yes, 99% of art schools are a sham. There's probably a handful of schools in the United States that I would recommend for going into animation, concept design, and things like that. But I would actually recommend, my recommendation now is that young people don't go to school for at least 2 years. Take the classes at the ateliers. You can do a lot of the stuff online. Learn your perspective, all your real basic stuff. If you're a first year student and you do not know perspective and you want to do drawing for a living, you are so handicapped, because usually what happens is those students by fourth year still don't know perspective. And that is 95% of my students. They just never learn it. They just never, ever, ever learn it. So I think because of the way high school is set up, that most people go into college like high school, and the first 2 years of college are like high school. So
Yeah.
I say, go out, you're serious, take your time. There's plenty of places like Concept Design Academy and Brainstorm and all these other, Steven Silver and all these other people that offer great courses online. They're affordable. Take your classes, get your basic chops up, and then explore the schools, take your time, do your research, and then go to school, because I think you'll be better mentally prepared. Or you may be an autodidact and self-focused enough that through taking some of these online classes and being diligent in studying, you will be able to go and get a job. Because the fact is, nobody cares about your degree. I worked for almost 30 years in this business without a degree. No one ever asked for a degree. They just looked at my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got all these kids now that spend money, and I see it all the time on Twitter. Spent all the money, went to college. Huge debt, not getting work. Mostly because when you look at their work, to be honest, most of the people complaining are just not very good. That and then parents think, oh, I want you to get a degree. Oh, I want you to have a degree. But Walt Disney doesn't care if you have a degree, if you can draw well. Lucasfilm doesn't care if you have a degree, if you can design great spaceships and do all the stuff that they need. That's what they care about. So, we've kind of gone beyond that. You really see that. There's a lot of articles you read about that now where they're saying, do you really know to go, you need to go to school? I don't think that you need to go to school to be an artist. And the reason that I am an artist had nothing to do with me going back to school. I went back to school to learn how to be a better painter and to get to the degree if I wanted to teach, because they want you to have a degree, even though I was teaching without a degree. So that's my advice. Go and take these online classes, go do figure drawing, go to the zoo and draw, because drawing is thinking. Get your skill set up, do research, talk to people, and then choose your school if you want to, and then go to school. Just, being pushed out the door into art school. What do you want to do? A lot of people don't even know what they want to do.
Right? Let's put a, I don't want to put a bonus because I want to answer like 2 more questions. Mike, you got a couple more minutes for us?
Yeah.
So Amani, I'll put Amani on the screen. Amani says, I have to push back a bit. I'm witnessing firsthand that without a degree, no one is looking at my portfolio. My question would be, and Amani, you don't have to put it in the chat right now, is like what avenues are you trying to get work in? I mean, if we're talking about education, that's probably where this gets a little dicey. A lot of times that we're able to teach at places to a certain level because of your past work or your fame or whatever that makes you an expert in what you're doing. And then at some level they go, well, you need your terminal degree. And that's usually where that shakes out at the end. But are you just talking about, creative work? I'd like to
Sure.
hear about
Like what is your, are you trying to get storyboard work? Are you trying to get comic book work? Are you trying to, where are you showing your portfolio? Because like I said, I never, even now, the job you know,
Oh, design, Mike.
well, okay. So maybe with a design job, they want you to have uh, a degree at a certain firm or firms. But I would also suspect that if your work was blowing their socks off, they might be willing to say, "Hey, like this person doesn't have a degree, you know." And then again, a degree to look, So I don't know. Like again, a design firm might want everybody to be lettered up, you know.
Hmm. Um,
I,
okay. All right. Well, that's an interesting counterpoint, Amani. We can probably talk about that in another episode. On this teacher tip, on the teacher tip, our good buddy Kenan James, and Kenan and I go way back. I believe, Kenan, didn't we interview you back on my first podcast, Comic Book Diner? You remember Comic Book Diner? Kenan asked, "What advice do you have for trying to teach students who aren't interested in what you have to say slash teach?" Mike, what do you do to those Saturday warriors that don't really want to be there? How do you break the seal? Skirt. See ya.
I don't try to force anything on anyone. That's not how that doesn't work, right? It's not like the military, right? The military kicks your ass if you don't do what the drill sergeant says, right? That's how it's a military it's a military, right? And there is certain aspects to the military that I think can be applied, the discipline, like a martial arts, as I've talked about before. But I don't try to force anybody to listen to me. They don't want to listen to me. I don't care. I don't. I'm not going to fight with some 15-year-old who thinks that he knows more than me.
Mhm.
The world will be the best teacher. Nothing I can say or do to that person is going to get them to do what I say. Right? Not
Real
mature.
crap.
Yeah, they're not mature. In the same way with somebody who's in college. If giving out an assignment, if they don't want to do it, don't do it. You don't want to know what I know? Don't don't do it. I
Yeah.
don't care. I'm not paying for I'm not your mom and dad. I'm not paying for your class. You'll fail the class, you
Right.
know. No, I long ago realized that right away when I first started teaching. It's like I always say, you give the little duck one piece of bread a week. The little duck can eat one piece of bread. Maybe some weeks they can eat two pieces of bread, but you can't give them the whole loaf of bread. They're going to drop it. It's going to go in the water. It's going to sink. All the fish are going to eat it, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so hungry. I don't have any bread."
You dropped
Um,
the bread.
you dropped your right, and you can't with art. You can't make somebody love it or want to do it. And if they're a smart ass and they think they know better than you, hey man, go right ahead. I'm not even interested in trying to defense with that person.
And if we're talking about younger kids, kind of like your job is to teach a class full of eighth graders how to, do 2 point perspective, that's a whole other thing.
Well, we both have taught kids, and one of the reasons I don't teach kids anymore because I don't want to be a babysitter, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of little young kids, they've got about 45 minutes or half an hour of being interested, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And if you got like a 3-hour class, you're like a gym teacher.
Right.
Pull your rope out, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I realize that I'm not interested in teaching. Hey, you draw a circle and you take two carrots. I'm not. I like kids. I've taught workshops and things like. I'm just not interested in teaching that now. I'm really only interested in teaching people who are interested in learning. I'm not interested in teaching sourpuss or, it's hard to teach teenagers sometimes because they're very, but, the class I taught for 10 years was teenagers. They were motivated enough to come after school to the class. So what I tried to always do was engage them and find out what they were interested in.
Yeah.
Then I felt that I could teach them based upon what they were interested in. Because, some people don't even know what they're interested in. You know what I mean? And so it's a whole process of even trying to get them to, my whole thing was just trying to get them to draw.
Right.
So I would give them, if they had an assignment that they wanted to draw, a thing they were interested in, okay, then I would help them do that. Or if they were just totally stumped, I would sort of give them 5 words and show them how to make an assignment for themselves out of things.
Yeah.
And then work with. Yeah. But yeah, if they're just like, yeah, I'm not gonna
Then sit there, right? Yeah.
That's pointless. That's pointless.
All right, last one, and then we're going home, y'all. Eternity, and this is a kind of a two-parter because I asked them to elaborate. Eternity says, do you have to be a John Romita Jr. nowadays in the age of Dogman and Smile in order to succeed in comics? So then I said, wait, what? and then Eternity said, with certain styles that work in a particular comic genre, like our good friend Jerry Kraft, Raina or Mobius and Jeff Darrow, comics being so wide, how do you know what's going to help thrive as far as skill and craftsmanship? So I read that at first, and I don't actually, Eternity, you might have made this worse. I think I'm more confused. It sounded like at first was, do you have to be of a skill set of a John Romita Jr. to rise above the den of graphic novel cartoonists? Is that kind of what you mean?
I mean, it's apples. It's kind of like apples and oranges. I mean, you have to be
oranges.
Yeah, because if you want to draw Spider-Man, yes.
Right.
If you want to draw Smile, no. I mean, a lot of these young adult graphic novels, which are very successful, are not drawn by people who have the drawing power of a John Romita. I mean, just the raw drawing power, compositional power. It's a different type of cartooning. It's cartooning that's in service of the story, and it's almost what I call sort of a neutral style. Sort of like, like better, like for better or worse, or a lot of the newspaper strips sort of have like what I call like a neutral style. They're not like Hal Foster, where it's like high level draftsmanship, like Mobius, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're drawing Lieutenant Blueberry, you need to be able to draw horses and, all the sort of authentic stuff. If you're doing something that's more cartooning,
you can throw me in there because that's what I'm doing. I'm in that camp.
Yeah. So I think your skill set has to fit the genre or particular media, So yeah, no. I mean, I think John Romita could draw one of those types of books if he was interested in. But yeah, I think if you're going to draw Spider-Man, you've got to have the ability to draw those kinds of stories that kind of way. If you're drawing, Dogman, no, he's doing superhero, but he's in no way doing anything like as complex as like a Marvel comic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the webtoons. Look at the average webtoon. There's a lot of webtoons of the drawings just kind of like, it's sort of generic to me. You know what I mean? It's a sort of generic anime style, which works telling that story.
And I think to what Mike was saying, I think the power of visual narrative, the power of cartooning, is that there's room for all of it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I don't know, maybe 5, 10 years ago when the whole graphic novel boom wasn't as big as it is now. There was a definite line in the sand, whereas there's still people that are butthurt that Dogman sells so many books. You know what I mean?
Well, publishers that publish the young adult books are just like Marvel and DC, right? They have they have their own genre and look and requirements, their own market, and so they're not going to take, Frank Miller, Sin City style, and put it on a book for 8-year-old girls, right?
Mhm.
That's not what they're looking for, right? Just like Marvel is not going to take. I mean, there's a lot of chat I see back and forth with people like Eric Larson or whatever. Image is not interested in producing those kinds of books because that's not their market,
Right.
right? And so they're not. They know that kind of cartooning style, it's sort of like a version of almost like the clear line style, very open,
Mhm.
very approachable, not very aggressive. That works for those types of stories. Kids seem to react to that. The readership reacts to that, right? They're not looking to have something like Jack Kirby.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that depending upon your personality and what you like to produce, you may find, oh, that's what I like that. I don't want to draw Spider-Man. Like I like reading Spider-Man, but I don't want to
Mhm.
draw Spider-Man. I mean, how many people on our podcast, how many artists have said came from comic strips? You know what I mean? They were not interested in drawing for Marvel,
Mhm.
and then they found their
Mhm.
path.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's it's always an interesting conversation, especially as we're seeing a lot of people in the comic book world trying to figure out what's the next thing, and it seems right now that graphic novels or working for a book publisher is the thing, and that there's a new line in the sand or a new railroad track going through the industry, but in a different place than it was when I started, because my railroad track was indies in mainstream. And now
Right.
it
Back then
seems.
you had like Bone and you had like what Fantagraphics was doing.
Mhm.
Brian Lee O'Malley was in that section, right? And
Mhm.
it seemed like there was more things are more sectioned off, in comics with the small press stuff like Chris Spitzer were doing, things like that. Um, and now that's all seemed to that's all changed. And then again, you got hundreds of people doing web cartoons. You're
Mhm.
gonna have success doing that, and they're never gonna do any of this other stuff. They're never gonna draw Spider-Man. They're never gonna work for a Random House. They're gonna be doing their own web cartoon.
Mhm. Yeah, the comments are going crazy. We got to get out of here, you guys. EJB says this room's for all kinds of styles. You can approach a Western like Blueberry or like Lukey Luke. There's
Yeah.
there's appeal in different voices. Facts. Yeah, and that's one of the most amazing things about being a cartoonist, that I think there's room for every cartoonist to bring their own voice to whatever project they're doing. And I think if you look at it as a very black and white, that's what I did there. Like, oh, well, these comic book dudes are better than these, middle grade cartoonists. I think that's missing the point of what makes comics and cartoons so fantastic.
Well, I
Just
think
go ahead.
also camps. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of guys I know, old heads they would call them now, who kind of look at uh, the webtoons or the stuff that like you're doing with Leon, and they're kind of like, or smile like, because all they really want to draw is, Marvel Comics, and they're really only interested in Marvel Comics, and they're not really interested in any other kind of comic. So, there's people like that who have a hard time making the transition. Then there's other people who come up who would never have ever read a Marvel comic and maybe only read. I had students that only read webcomics.
Right. Right.
Read print comics at all.
Right.
They didn't know who Kelvin and Hobbes was. Nothing. They just read what they could get on their phone.
Right.
Now, out of that, there's going to be a whole group of people that are producing comics in that way, and they're not going to be worried about drawing Spider-Man or Lucky Luke or anything else. You know.
I love Lucky Luke.
Lucky Luke. I follow the guy that's drawing Lucky Luke now on Instagram.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We need to have some more Euro artists on. All right, you guys.
A bunch of guys on. If you go to my Instagram and look at the people that I follow a lot of great cartoonists all over the world. I follow these guys from Italy that do Disney comics. Really, just amazing stuff. You never see it here.
Yeah.
You never see it here. But yeah, there's all kinds of great cartoonists all over the world that are doing stuff in Europe that you would never see in America. You know, there's lots of great stuff so I would recommend anybody go to my Instagram and look at the people that I'm following. I follow all kinds of character designers and animators and illustrators and cartoonists from like all over the world. And then the interesting thing to do is to do that, then to take that person and go to Instagram and type in their name, and then you'll find all this other stuff. It's like a rabbit hole. I mean, you can literally spend hours and hours and hours finding all kinds of great cartooning, all kinds of different styles all over the world.
I love it. That's what makes us special. Somebody just asked, what's up, Thriller? My Instagram is jacked. I might have to start another one, Mike. I can't seem to get my thing going back. So I'll let you guys know. I'm kind of enjoying the break right now, not having to worry about Instagram. But all right, you guys, we did some overtime for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Where did the time go, Mike Manley? I think we had a fantastic chat. Thank you to my best bud, Mike Manley, and also thanks to you guys, the penciliers, the day ones and live chatters who hung out with us tonight, asked fantastic questions. And
I hope you found it useful. I really hope the whole point is that this, for the younger people who are on their glide path, that they will find that what we talked about tonight will be guides to help you get what you want. That's important to me.
Yeah. So if everything goes as planned, we'll be back here next week on our usual bat time, Wednesdays.
Our guests we will have next week.
Oh,
we should meet our guests.
Yeah, you talk about them, Mike.
Okay, so we're going to have Mark Schultz and Tom Yates, who together produced Prince Valiant, but who separately have produced great volumes of work. Mark did Xenozoic Tales, still does Xenozoic Tales, does a lot of his own art books now. So we're going to have them on the podcast. And then the week after that, we will have Phil Hester on the podcast.
Love Phil's stuff. That's fantastic. We're back to Murderer's Row status, Mike. I love it. Right. And also just remember, these are usually 2-hour podcasts. We do deep diving, not your regular magazine with lots of big pictures and like a little bit of
advertising, no filler.
That's right. No filler. This is a neck beard free zone. You get nothing but straight table talk. All right, you guys. Thanks so much. We're gonna cut out. You know what we're about to do. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. For Mike, our disembodied face in the clouds, Brett Blevins. I'm Jamar Nicholas. You know what to do. Stay safe and wash those curvy hands. Oh, look. That's so fantastic. Ooh-wee. Good night, you guys. We'll see you next week.
See ya.